Hello, I'm Keith Sutton, Chair of the Wake County Board of Education. Thank you for joining us for our weekly address. We have updates today regarding meal service, device distribution, and the successes and challenges of continuous remote learning. At this time, I'll turn it over to our Superintendent, Kathy Moore.
Thank you, Chair Sutton. I will begin by once again thanking our dedicated child nutrition team who are serving about 24,000 meals each weekday to feed our students. Over the past month, they've served a total of about 400,000 meals from 46 distribution sites, including our Big Bus food truck program. I also want to thank our bus drivers for their help in delivering food to communities that are separate from our school sites. You can find all of our food distribution locations, dates, and times on our website at wcpss.net/food. As you know, we are wrapping up the first week of continuous remote learning in our traditional and year-round schools, and the second week for modified calendar and early college high schools. I would like to give a special thanks to our teachers who have worked hard to make engagement happen so quickly. For weeks, our teachers have been collaborating to develop meaningful learning opportunities, and their efforts are already proving successful. Just as when schools are in regular session, it is our teachers who make the difference, and they are continuing to do so in these extraordinary times. Many of our schools have reported high rates of engagement with their students. As you would expect in the early days of this unprecedented effort, we have also recognized some challenges. While many schools are reporting strong participation and access, for example, others are seeing lower rates of participation. Here are some of our strategies for addressing this. We are making great strides in providing technology to those who need it. As of today, 152 schools had distributed nearly 20,000 Chromebooks. Also, just yesterday, we configured 3,200 hotspots that will be sent to schools next week for distribution to families. Our school system help desk has worked with hundreds of families to resolve tech issues, and we have published a frequently asked questions document at wcpss.net/techfaq. Students can go to student.studenttechhelp.wcpss.net to submit a help request or call 919-694-8100. We will continue to reach out via email, phone calls, and postcards to ensure we are reaching as many of our families as possible. We are also working with agencies and organizations such as Education Justice Alliance to help us reach families who need resources and support for remote learning. For our families with students who are English language learners, documents and videos are being translated. In addition, our Family Academy is reaching out to English language learning families, and our help desk has interpreters who are readily available. I would also like to return to our overarching message of grace and flexibility. I fully acknowledge and understand that many parents are struggling to support their children's learning at home, especially those who may be juggling job responsibilities. What I want to say to parents is this: you're doing great. Under these conditions, every effort you make to help your child learn at home is commendable. Under these conditions, an incomplete assignment here or there is understandable and should not cause you or your child anxiety. I am confident that real learning is happening and will continue to happen at home. The most important thing is to keep trying and remain engaged. Just as we are urging our teachers to extend their students grace and flexibility, I urge parents to give themselves grace and flexibility as well. With that, I'll turn it back over to Chair Sutton.
Thank you, Superintendent Moore. We indeed are making significant strides as we support the many needs of our 162,000 students. I would like to use my remaining time to put these strides into some perspective. I've heard from some families who are anxious that our schools, and by extension their children, are falling behind students in other districts. It is true that remote learning has not replaced the benefits of the physical classroom. We knew that would be true from the start. But at the same time, we have been in contact with many districts inside and outside of North Carolina, and very few, if any, are teaching new curriculum at this time. And if they are, it is not being graded. The important thing to remember is we are working our way through a global pandemic. To some degree, every student is facing similar challenges. It is certainly possible to find a student in another state or district who appears to be learning more or has a teacher who appears to have mastered technology. It is also true that people outside our school system look at our teachers and wonder why their child isn't getting that same level of instruction. This is what happens when an entire country converts to remote learning with little experience. Against that backdrop, I'll proudly compare our accomplishments. In our first week, for example, schools reported somewhat higher rates of contact and engagement than the informal reports being shared nationally. Teachers are reporting success using flipped classrooms, where they record lessons for students to view on their own schedule. Thousands of teachers are meeting online with tens of thousands of students each and every day. We have provided laptops to more than 20,000 students in 2 weeks. We expect that number to hit nearly 30,000 before we are done. And despite a slight delay in receiving the 10,500 Wi-Fi hotspots that we ordered, a team of both WCPSS staff and volunteers from Activate Good and AT&T began working tirelessly this week to prepare those devices for distribution. A process that could have taken weeks is going to now be done in just days. We realize there are still large gaps in terms of equitable access to learning. Those gaps are completely unacceptable, and sadly, they are not unique to Wake County. What I can assure you is we are working every day to address this problem. Our goal is to give each and every student the best opportunity to learn and succeed, even under these challenging circumstances. I greatly appreciate the patience and understanding our community has shown as we navigate these challenges together. Our school system is far from perfect, but I don't know of any other district in the country that is working harder for its students and families than the Wake County Public School System. We will now take questions from the news media. Please introduce yourself and the media outlet you represent.
Hi, this is Gloria Rodriguez with ABC 11. I was wondering if you've been able to track how many students are actually going online for distance learning, if you have percentages, students that have been able to access this and how many are not going online for that distance learning.
Hi, this is Superintendent Moore. I'll start with that and then turn it over to Mr. Sutton if he has any other thoughts. Our initial feedback from schools around contact, which was just making contact with students, was really high. Lots of 100%, over 90% was pretty typical just in those initial couple of weeks of contacting students and families. As we've headed into remote learning, those numbers have dropped some, and the data that we're getting back from schools anecdotally is on the lowest side, maybe 55%, but 75%, 50 to 75% is pretty normal. Most on the higher end of that 75%. But we're still pretty early, and we're having to make some decisions about what we actually mean by tracking, because not all learning is synchronous. Some of it is asynchronous, and there is no attendance in Power School. So we're still trying to figure out how to get a handle on that number, but it is tracking higher than what you see at national averages. But yet we still have room to grow.
Hi, this is Jamise Price with CBS 17. For those students who don't have a laptop right now or didn't have a laptop earlier this week, what do you say to their parents, and will they now be behind?
We are working to continue distribution. That distribution is continued into this week. I would say to parents, again, that they should not be concerned to reach out to their school, their principal, and make contact because we are in the process of still getting devices to those schools. I'll let Superintendent Moore add any other details.
So that's another reason it was so important for our teachers to reach out to students, and they were really the front lines for determining which students did or did not have devices available at home, because those teachers should know that students do not have devices and can be engaging them and are engaging them through things like learning packets or other ways where they are contacting students through asynchronous methods to make sure that they are still able to keep up with the work the kids are doing in the classroom. It really was why it was so important for our teachers to be the one that reach out to students to see, so that as they get started with their different methods, they can accommodate for those through the remote learning process.
So school is out through May 15th. School is out through May 15th, and so has the county come up with a plan if they don't resume?
So I'll start with that, Mr. Sutton. So we are planning on multiple fronts right now. We're planning for school to resume on May 18th and what that relaunch of school would look like. We are also looking at the possibility that school may not resume on May 18th and how we will need to extend our remote learning work potentially through the end of the school year. And because we have several calendars, that end of the school year is not quite all the same for everybody. And we're also preparing for what the beginning of the school year next year would look like. And some of that is dependent on what happens at the end of this school year. So all of those scenarios are in play as we plan and work with schools and teachers and our principals in particular, who are really on the front line of all of this work and helping us plan and maintain their communities in a remote learning stance and in a teaching and learning stance.
This is Gloria Rodriguez again with ABC 11. The county manager yesterday revealed the first budget proposal with an additional $30 million for Wake County Public Schools. Do you think that's going to be enough? And are there certain things that would have to get cut in the next budget?
So, I mean, I'll start that and then I'll turn it over to Mr. Sutton. So, you know, my responsibility and our responsibility as a school system is to provide the county with a budget that demonstrates the needs that we have. We also need to be cognizant and partners with our commissioners around the fact that we are in the middle of a pandemic that is going to have an economic impact on our community. And so the $29 million increase is the smallest, quite frankly, that's been in a number of years. And I think that does reflect some thoughtful planning and some difficult decisions already about where we need to prioritize our dollars for next year. That being said, there is continued work that will need to happen with the commissioners in order to achieve a final budget that will really let us know what our options are for next year. And there's still a month of work or so before us in that arena. Mr. Sutton?
Well, I'll just add, we were pleased to receive the superintendent's budget. This week the board will look at that, conduct a number of work sessions over the next few weeks to determine where we stand. As the superintendent said, it's our job to present to the county manager, what our needs are, and then they will determine how and in what way they might finance those needs. Will it be enough? I think what we're looking at now is the bare minimum as we look forward to the next year. Again, given that we are in the middle of a global pandemic, so we look forward to partnering with the county to figure out how we might address those needs.
Ideal budget be for you? What would it include that it doesn't currently?
I'm sorry, could you repeat the question?
What would an ideal budget be for you? What would it include that this current proposal does not?
Kathy, you want to take that?
Yeah, I'll start in a couple of places. So last year, you may recall that the district, Wake County Public School System, and the county commissioners were messaging a multi-year plan to try to take some of the areas where we had not fully recovered since the Great Recession in 08-09 and try to begin to make some strides back to recover some of that lost ground. And so there were several areas too of note that included pay for our lowest paid employees and our hardest to fill positions where we are not competitive, a multi-year plan to add local dollars to those salaries. A second area was our maintenance and operations. We know that maintaining our schools clean and safe and good places for teaching and learning are equally as important as the other areas that we fund, but we had fallen far behind. So we had a multi-year plan over several years to fund those areas incrementally to try to gain back that ground. So one of the areas that has taken a hit in the budget proposal that we have moved forward are some of those multi-year plans where we've had to scale back and really either extend the period of time during which we will try to play catch up or ask for more in subsequent years in order to get caught up. So those are just a couple of examples. Don't know if Mr. Sutton has anything else.
No, I don't have anything else to add.
Karen Hughes, the News and Observer. This is, I guess, for the superintendent in particular, but going back to, you said about the participation rates being only about 50 to 75% at schools. How concerned are you about that students are going to be suffer some major long-lasting educational impact from not being able to get online this semester?
So I think that is of great concern to us. I do know that we are continuing our efforts to reach students, and we're having to be really creative about that. So, some of our traditional methods may not work, but I'm hopeful that we will increase that number because our teachers were able to reach so many students just to contact them and see how they were doing early on. So now really it is about identifying if there are barriers or other reasons that students are not engaging so that we can continue to see that number grow. I do think it's actually a pretty good number for the first week, and I do expect it to go up.
How many
for those students who are currently not engaging, what are their challenges that they're facing? Why are they not going online and doing the remote learning?
Well, that's part of what we're trying to determine. We know that there may be some that are not engaging because of access to resources, but we've made such a great dent in that I think really now we're looking at whether it's connectivity or it's support at home or it's that's the work that's before us, is having our teachers continue to reach out to students who have not engaged, and for us to be more clear as a district about how we're defining and measuring engagement, which we're still working through right now. But our goal is to find and reach those students that we see are not engaged and continue to work to get them engaged because we know that it's important.
What schools haven't received their laptops yet, their Chromebooks yet?
I do not have that list in front of me at this time. I do know that some of the schools were delayed because they actually didn't have the Chromebooks in stock at the school, and we had to move them from other schools. So that has been a process as well, moving them to the schools where they need to be. But we should be done fairly shortly with that part of the distribution.
And I'll just add to that we started with our elementary and middle schools, and following up with our high schools. So it may be more of our high schools that at this point are either just receiving devices, because there we found that fewer students at the high school level needed devices. More of our students at the early ages in elementary and middle schools needed devices.
What's been the conversation surrounding graduation at this point?
So I'll start there. It is important to us to maintain, for the time being, our plans for graduation. We know that they may be interrupted, as so many things have been interrupted, but we have maintained our contracts for our graduation venues. We're not letting go of them. We have had discussions about alternatives should those late May, early June dates not work. And I really am committed to figuring out a way to provide our seniors with that milestone. Mr. Sutton, did you have anything else?
I want to add to that. I am committed to that as well. We know that our seniors have lost quite a bit during this pandemic. It is my hope, and I think that of the board and the superintendent, as you just heard, that if we can salvage anything, it would certainly I would like to see that graduation experience. So we're going to work very hard to make sure that we can have a meaningful experience for our seniors and have that opportunity.
It's Adam Owens with WRAL News. Wanted to see if there were any updates on guidance from the state on grading. It sounded earlier like you're still waiting on some of that. Where does that stand now?
I can start. So we are waiting. The guidance for seniors has already been established, but it is really kindergarten through 11th grade that we don't have final determination on. Right now, we are relying on the information that DPI put out earlier around the 5 critical factors that need to be in place in order to formally assess learning. But we are encouraging our teachers to provide feedback, to pay attention to growth and engage students in learning while putting aside formal grades, so to speak, but that does not mean that we're not progress monitoring. But what will actually happen with those grades has yet to be determined. Anything for you, Mr. Sutton?
I think I would just add that we are, hearing quite a bit from parents and students, and we continue to welcome that input. I know that the state board is hearing from those same parents and students as well. And so again, Adam, we'll just continue to await any additional guidance that the state might provide.
Kern Huey, there's been some talk in some other districts, even at state level, about possibly having a summer school programs to help the students. Is that something that's being looked at as an option right now?
So I'll start in a couple of thoughts there. So there are a number of things that have been talked about in terms of what are the opportunities to gain time for learning. Everything from summer school and lots of different ways that could be defined in terms of students either who were not passing a course or students who want to improve a grade. It can be really small to really large depending on the target audience. There's summer school, there's some even have had conversations about extending the school year. There have been other conversations about beginning the school year early next year in order to capture some of the learning loss. There have been a number of conversations, no decisions. Have you heard anything else, Mr. Sutton?
No, I have not.
Do we have any last questions?
Correll Sampson with Spectrum News. Should staff, including transportation bus drivers and cafeteria workers, be concerned about their pay?
I'll start. The board just this week, we took some action to provide increases or additional pay for some of those exact workers that you just mentioned. And so I don't think that they should. There's always concern, but I think we understand that concern. We've taken those steps to try to address that, at least from a compensation standpoint. We've also tried to make sure that from a safety standpoint, that we have the adequate PPE and other things that they need to be safe. And so we'll continue to monitor that situation. I'll turn it over to Superintendent Moore to add in additional details.
I think the only additional piece of feedback I would provide is we've worked really hard to make sure that all of our employees have opportunities to earn their paycheck. One of the things that really did help that was the action by the governor around the state emergency leave that was provided. However, that is through April 30th. So I do hope that there are discussions that are going on right now about the opportunity for leave beyond April 30th that could support those employees who are not able to come into work, that aren't able to meet their obligations and duties due to other factors, but could have access to leave beyond April 30th to support them continuing to earn their paycheck.
And Corell Sampson with Spectrum News one last time. You guys blew through your spring break mentally. When do you feel you'll actually be able to have a break from school?
So I'm not sure that I have the luxury of that, or we have the luxury of that. I think it's important, and that's why it's part of our message when we start talking about grace and flexibility. This is such an anxious time and such an anxious period, and we know that folks are worried on many different levels. And so schooling is important, learning is important, but our own mental health and well-being is important as well. So I think it's important to ask ourselves every day what we are doing to celebrate something that has nothing to do with the worries in our life. And I hope that our folks, we try to message that and model that with our principals and with our teachers, and as we message things out, and as you see today, even with our parents and families, because we don't know when whatever the new normal looks like is going to actually arrive. Mr. Sutton.
Well, Kara, I appreciate the spirit of your question. I think most would agree that students, families, and those of us here have been working quite hard over these last few weeks, and I would suspect that at some point when the county, when the state, and when the country opens up, many of us will find an appropriate time and way to take some needed mental health break.